The line between discipline and abuse will always be murky, but how do we actually draw this line? And what are the variables to determine whether an act is abusive? The big dilemma for this video, just how much is too much? Here's a summary. Let's get into it. Fundamentally, abuse is defined as treating with cruelty or violence, especially regularly or repeatedly. Both the World Health Organization and the Children and Young Persons Act further break down abuse to four main types: physical abuse, psychological abuse, sexual abuse, and neglect. These are forms of both commission and omission, leading to potential or actual harm. Though the CYPA has been existing since 1993, abuse is still very real and unfortunately not uncommon in society today. In 2021, MSF reported that there was an increase in the number of abuse cases investigated from 2020. And the stats of the individual types of abuse are also not looking that good. Neglect more than doubled. Sexual abuse jumped 70%, and physical abuse rose 16%. I'm gonna leave this here for a few more seconds for you to process how insane and tragic these stats are. Like, come on. Now let's define discipline. Discipline is the practice of training people to obey rules or a code of behavior using punishment to correct disobedience. From here, we can conclude that in the most basic sense, they are both similar as they can be violent and lead to potential harm, and the difference is that discipline is with the intention to punish a behavior, whereas abuse might not have that intention at all. In this paper, Whipple and Ritchie reference the term sub-abusive culture to describe socially acceptable violence towards children for discipline purposes. In Singapore, a commonly shared childhood experience would be caning, or any parental aggressive behavior that does not meet perceptions of child abuse. Now, this is where the line starts to get a little bit fucked. While the term sub-abusive culture is used to describe acts of discipline that are not at the intensity of abuse, it still does have the word abusive in it. So when exactly does discipline cross over to abuse? Which step is the one that all hell breaks loose? Following the four types of abuse, there are also four types of parenting styles defined by this woman. I remember citing her in literally all my papers when I was studying early childhood. Her name is Diana Bobrit. Anyway, here it is. We're only going to focus on two styles for this video: authoritarian and authoritative, aka being harsh so that they are strong enough to survive in the real world, versus the world is already harsh, so home should be a safe place to be weak. In the paper Guards or Guardians, authoritative parenting is defined as focusing on the personal growth of the child. The book Brain Body Parenting adds that the focus is on finding the reason behind the behaviors instead of simply punishing it. Basically, they are the emotionally available parents that still establishes firm rules and expectations. The parent who actually explains instead of just saying no, and is the parenting style that is probably most willing to apologize to their child when they themselves fuck up. Research has shown that authoritative parenting raises children who are more psychosocially mature, self-reliant, and less afraid to externalize their problems and emotions as compared to those raised with other parenting styles. The authoritarian parenting style is the one that is the closest on the line between discipline and abuse. The parent who believes that negative reinforcement and punishment is the most efficient way to discipline a child. The parent who is more of a discipline master than a teacher. I guess this is most Asian parents and our Asian parents' parents and their parents and so on. But I'll talk more about this later. For now, let's discuss some mindsets that could fester into authoritarian parenting and make it so common in Singapore culture. Strawberry generation is often used by Generation X or millennials to describe the MZ generation or Gen Z, with the negative connotation of weak and pampered and sensitive because strawberries are easily bruised. Some common phrases by grandparents could also stem from this mindset, such as saying, "Nowadays, parents love their children too much," or "Back in my day, we had it a lot worse than this." In the Straits Times In Your Opinion podcast, it further elaborates.
They've been labeled as entitled, lazy, narcissistic, and easily bruised, so hence the strawberries. They've also been called snowflakes because they will melt if pressed too hard.
Yeah, I think the labels tend to oversimplify. I mean, take resilience, for example, right? People often say that youth lack resilience, but resilience is something that you develop over time. It's not just a trait, it's something you grow into.
Next is generational parenting. It is the process through which an earlier generation psychologically influences parenting attitudes and behavior of the next generation, aka the parenting style is inherited from how our own parents parented us. As the generations evolve along with society, the quality of life will undeniably get better and better, with the exception that one day the world just ends. It's a never-ending branch. Gen X will think that they had it worse than Gen Y. Gen Y will think that they had it worse than Gen Z, and Gen Z, Gen A, and so on. One recent example I can think of was when the education system changed for the better. The no more exams for P1 to P2, the change in the streaming system. Past students, including myself, who saw the change, get envious that it didn't happen while they themselves were students, or think, wow, kids nowadays have it so good. This envy could also bleed into parenting styles, such as thinking, if I had to go through this, you do too, or my parents did so much worse to me than this. The paper Authoritarian Parenting Style in Asian Societies explains that the prevalence of authoritarian parenting in Asia compared to Western countries could be due to the connotations attached to terms such as strictness and discipline. In Western culture, strictness is viewed as a negative trait associated with parental hostility, aggression, and dominance, whereas in Asian culture, being strict is a form of tough love that shows that you care about your child enough to discipline them. When your child obeys you without question, it is a sign that the child is 孝顺 or showing filial piety. However, with the shifts in current society, psychologists and youths have been calling out the consequences of the authoritarian parenting style, be it through research or through personal experience. In the book Brain Body Parenting, delahooke argues against authoritarian parenting by writing, if the ability to control emotions and behaviors isn't fully developed until early adulthood, why are we requiring preschoolers to do this and then punishing them when they can't? I think the line between discipline and abuse is actually not just a simple line. Here's how I think it'll look like a graph. We're back to Bet's class in secondary school with our rulers and XY variables. The variables are frequency, form, intent, and intensity. How often does the act happen? How many ways are used? Caning, spanking, scolding, locking in a room, etc. The intent. And as mentioned before, the main difference between discipline and abuse is the intention. Are you disciplining your child in a way that will help them learn from their negative behavior? The Straits Times found that parents' mood and stress levels were strong influences that could lead to impulsive physical discipline as they acted out of anger and frustration. And I think if the intent is to let out your own anger and frustrations, that is not disciplining your child. The intensity. Are there marks, burns, or bruises left behind? If the intent is to discipline a child, pain need not be inflicted to the point where there is a visible aftermath. And finally, one more variable that can't be measured on a graph, whether it will cause long-term psychological effects to the child. It is no debate that long-term, high-intensity authoritarian parenting and sub-abusive culture can lead to negative psychological effects as the child grows into an adult. The Straits Times reported that young adults who were physically disciplined in their childhood experienced lasting strained parent-child relationships, challenges in expressing and regulating their emotions, and poorer social-emotional well-being in general. Some even open up to receiving therapy due to the psychological scars left by their own parents. As if the already prevalent style of harsh parenting was not enough in itself, 3 years ago the world was hit by COVID-19. It not only took a toll on everyone's health, employment, and finances, but also on psychological health. As such, this paper on the effects of parental stress during COVID-19 in Singapore shows that adults under more parental stress were more likely to use harsh parenting and felt less close with their children as compared to before the pandemic. Brain Body Parenting shares a similar experience that shows how environmental changes can lead to parental stress and thus taking it out on our children. She writes, "I'll sometimes say things I later regretted, projecting my own lack of internal resources onto my kids. Hurry up, you're making us late. My depleted state was adding to my shame for being late, my own issue, and I was taking it out on my children. Lack of sleep, work stress, multitasking, and managing their lives, and my own, frequently turned me into an authoritarian and controlling mom, markedly different from how I was with them when my nervous system felt safe and secure." Hearing things like this as a one-time off thing might not cause that big of an impact, but imagine this happens every day for the rest of your life. And the sad truth is, by the time the long-term psychological effects fester and show themselves, it's already too late. Where is your line between discipline and abuse? Leave a comment. Okay, bye.